Hi, my name is Lloyd Norman. I'm with ProSymmetry. Thank you for joining me today as we talk about how capacity planning accelerates scaled agile value flow. I'm going to be spending the next 20 minutes talking about how capacity planning is absolutely intrinsic to scaled agile delivery, certainly effective scaled agile delivery. Then I'm going to show you what that looks like in a production environment. And then I'm going to close it out by talking about how you have the opportunity through the right automation to be able to actually design your future flow and mitigate risks that would impede flow. So let's dive in. If you're on this call, you are likely already on your way to implementing the Scaled Agile framework in some way, shape, or form, or you might just be evaluating what the benefits of moving to SAFe are in that safe delivery cycle, and I commend you for doing so. But either way, you're likely wondering, well, how is it that resource capacity planning fits in with scaled agile delivery? So that's what we're going to be talking about today, particularly in regard to how it positively affects flow. So, of course, the SAFe framework promotes value delivery across arts, teams, and roles. Arts are simply teams of teams, but it looks at all of the resources needed to address the demand that's coming at you from product managers, epic owners, ops managers, projects, whatever the case may be. Two wonderful planning tools that the Scaled Agile framework provides. One is an art planning event, and really, it's a series of planning events at an art level. Again, an art stands for Agile Release Train. It's represented over here as a team of teams. It's a very effective way, as you will learn, to deliver work, to make sure that you're driving value into the enterprise. The second level of planning events really happen at a portfolio level, and they are all about aligning holistic value across the portfolio, across the enterprise, with available capacity as well. And so, those planning events are critical, and I'm going to be referencing them throughout today's discussion. As we align our delivery to available capacity, um, we come to understand a couple of things. One, that when we get inside roughly 90 days, and whether you're talking about delivering a project, when you're within 90 days of having resources deliver tasks, or if we're talking about a program increment planning event, which is a ceremony that Scaled Agile has to make sure that roughly on a quarterly basis, your teams have known capacity, that they're going to be decomposing work and they know what they're working on. They've committed to that, if you will, and they're going to start delivering those features. Those forecasts are fixed. But out here's where, organizations get the real benefit from capacity planning. I suggest that people go out at least 12 months from a planning perspective and start aligning work to, priorities, if you will, to their available capacity. Even though these forecasts are going to refine over time as you get closer and closer to the PI, program increment planning boundary, or closer to delivery, the act of going through and aligning your capacity across your delivery priorities is remarkably clarifying. It lets you know what sequence your portfolio needs to be delivering in, and it qualifies and clarifies risks. It's a continuous exercise because priorities shift out here, and until resources are committed, we should expect them to shift. But we have to be able to plan based on capacity, or we're never going to get the alignment that we need. I also like to remind people that responding to change over following a plan implies there's a plan. So we should have a plan, and that plan should, in fact, be based on capacity. And to validate that assumption, let me pop out here to scaledagileFramework.com. I will say that there are dozens and dozens of references to capacity planning out on the scaledagiler.com website. Each one of these tiles here represents a window that I've opened that talks about capacity planning out on scaledagileFramework.com. I'm only going to talk about 4 of these today, maybe 5. This is the first one. Talks about how you should split your portfolio epics up into features, size them based on the skills that are associated with arts, and plan how that load is going to impact delivery timing. I would submit to you that our clients take this one level deeper. They tend to do this at a team level because most of our clients don't have fully cross-functional arts. That's aspirational. You can certainly do this by art, but from a realistic perspective, almost none of our clients have cross-functional arts. And so, they're able to break this work down by feature at a team level and at a role level for those supporting organizations that aren't yet aligned in an agile fashion. Here's another example of how it's important to do capacity allocation before PI planning. You'll break out on the type of work that you're going to be doing. Another example talks about roadmap planning and the importance of having various roadmaps. I would submit to you that having a 12-month PI planning roadmap at a minimum is ideal. I know some that go out 18 months for this, but 12 months at a minimum will allow you to set financial expectations to your CFO so they can look at CapEx impacts to work that's in the pipeline. But what you're aligning here is, again, your capacity, your availability to do work across the skills and teams that are needed to deliver those capabilities on your roadmap. The same with proportional epic cost. How can you possibly look at your work and decide how you need to spread it from a cost perspective across your value streams if you haven't sized your work, which is an exercise in capacity planning. So if you're going to do reliable proportional cost estimation, you've got to be doing some capacity planning associated with that. Understanding which arts, teams, and organizations are needed to deliver the capabilities that you have planned for the next 3 to 6 months. And finally, relative to flow. There's team flow, art flow, solution flow, and portfolio flow, and you'll learn about those as you move through the scaled agile implementation process. But all of those are positively affected by the 8 flow accelerators that were clearly articulated in SAFe 6.0. I just happened to pick art flow, and I'm going to walk through just a few of these to show you that capacity planning is just pervasive throughout SAFe. When it talks about limiting WIP, it says you have to understand your capacity allocation. When you talk about addressing bottlenecks, again, you've got to increase capacity at the bottleneck. How can you do that unless you're planning capacity? If, in fact, you're talking about reducing queue lengths, then you have to understand how to leave capacity for emerging priorities. That means that you've planned for things that aren't emerging, right? So it's absolutely pervasive throughout the scaled agile delivery and planning process. Okay, here's a little bit deeper look at capacity planning from a scaled agile perspective. It's important that we size all required capacity. We just talked about that, meaning the teams and roles that are needed for delivery. So if you've got a hybrid portfolio, if you will, where you're doing epics and projects side by side, you've got to look at what the demand is that's coming to the various arts, these shared services arts, as well as your stream-aligned arts, and the teams that are going to be required to do that delivery, but always from a capacity perspective. And heavens, you cannot forget your internal business partners, compliance, audit, regulatory, legal, the external contractors that might be needed, and the external expenses. Your automation must be able to track your external expenses as well. Otherwise, how can you drive financial reporting, proportional costs to value streams that aren't accounting for software, hardware, or professional services? You must be tracking that, both from an availability and a cost perspective. The challenge is your available capacity is a moving target because based on changing market conditions, it's what business agility is all about. The capacity that you need to do the work remains largely static. Don't get me wrong, those estimates improve over time, as we just talked about. But the availability of people and teams to do that does change, which means that this alignment is continuous. So how do we make that easier? If Epic owners, art leadership and others, program managers, portfolio managers, if they're continuously aligning work, how do we make that process easier? I would submit to you that you should consider centralizing your roadmap and capacity planning. It's the only way to really truly get fast, adaptable flow. And here's the issue. You've got these wonderful arts with roadmaps that are being driven by well-informed product managers, but they may or may not be tied to the actual capacity needed to deliver those capabilities, especially when you're talking about shared services that are supporting that delivery. It's very common for us to see release train engineers supporting arts, and they're doing their capacity planning in a spreadsheet. Well, you've got audit organizations over here that are using some kind of a tool like Teammate Plus or Archer. Those aren't purpose-built resource capacity planning tools either. Operations almost exclusively does their staffing plans in tools like Excel. Technology shared services, they're typically using a PPM tool. Unless you get everybody on the same sheet of music, you are going to have a very difficult time consistently aligning capacity planning. And if you're not doing that, you're going to have rude awakenings when you hit the PI planning boundary. The other thing about aligning strategy holistically to your capacity is that once you align strategic themes all the way down to teams and roles and people that are responsible for delivery, from a pipeline perspective, you get to see your planned flow distribution. It's fine to work with a tool like ADO or Jira and look in arrears, a lagging indicator of, oh, this is what my flow distribution looked like over the last 90 days. But wouldn't it be better to see what's coming at you for the next 9 months? You can also visualize skill gaps. If you know which teams are always at their capacity limits and you're always having to push work because of that, then you can identify that and put mitigation plans in early to do so. We talked about proportional cost, how that requires capacity planning. But you also need to be able to see and visualize your retention risks. And those risks couldn't be clearer, and they're clearly articulated by looking at your WIP limits and your allocation limits. And if teams or people are exceeding those, then you know you've got a potential retention issue. So let me show you exactly what this looks like, from from an from an implementation perspective. If I'm in fact a release train engineer and I want to look across the teams in my art, I should be able to see immediately where I've got over allocations. And I can see right here that the inventory team is working on too many things in March. So I've got to adjust that. I've got to go out and talk to, for example, whoever the Epic owner is on the Barcelona 13 project, right? And it looks like, the Epic owner is Doug, right? So, I'm going to go talk to Doug about that. It's very easy for me to change my allocations because of this drag and drop interface. I love that. It's very Excel-like in that way. But the data's all tied together on the back end, and everybody's working and rowing in the same direction, working off the same data. So if I'm, again, Doug out here from an Epic owner perspective, I'm looking at this same effort, I'm saying, oh, why do I have red on my Epic? These people aren't over allocated on my effort, but overall they're red, which means that whoever owns this resource, which in this case would be art leadership for the manufacturing art, then they've over allocated this team. Well, that's a risk to my initiative, and I'd like to understand what's going on with that. Also, why is it that I only have a generic resource here, not a named resource? I need to go fix that as well. From an LPM perspective, portfolio management, how easy is it to be able to flow back and forth between allocated percentage, cost, time, story points? You can look rolled up to a strategic theme level, OKR level, specific epics, projects, and features, and align them by cost. The nice thing is you have teams of different velocities from different arts, and you're able to map them onto a common timeline, making it so much easier to align work across shared services. And you can do that from a cost perspective as well. Finally, I want to show you the ability to model. This interactive modeling capability is unique to Tempus Resource, but it's incredibly helpful for our clients. When they're looking at introducing work, they've got their portfolio up above. All of this is happening in a digital twin of their production environment. You are not impacting production at all by doing this what-if analysis. Anybody can do what-if analysis. You can have as many models as you're authorized to do so. But once you've sized your work, you can look out here and see interesting things like, well, it looks like my manufacturing art is a little bit over allocated. Oh, but it turns out because we're not cross-functional, we're heinously over allocated on the shipping team. So what can we do here? Well, we know that we can't move or keep the lights on work, but let's take a look at this Quicksilver effort. What happens if we actually roll that out? You can see in real time all of the impacted roles. It's not just your art, but it's the other people that are needed to deliver that capability, which could end up being, a lot of different kind of roles. Also, this is very hard to determine what the cascading impacts are without automation. Look, you're actually going backwards. Before and after in September, you're making the situation worse for your Epic owners. You're actually increasing demand on them. So to understand the interplay between these roles, as you look at shifting work, crashing work, fattening teams, it's all something that needs to be considered. Again, if you've got a team that's clearly over allocated, very easy to come in here and say, what happens if I add 2 people to this team? Well, it drives my allocation down to something reasonable. So you can easily fatten teams. Again, crash work, modify work. Come in and say, what happens if I include brand new work into my portfolio? Again, I can see all the roles before and after. Before and after, you're hammering your mechanical team by introducing that work, right? So these things are just incredibly helpful to see through a tool like this. You can also come in here and say, hey, I don't know when I need to start this. Let's let the system determine when to start it. And can I start this with fewer resources? Oh yeah, I can actually bump this up by 8 months, but I'm going to have problems with these certain resources here. So the AI capabilities that are built into this tool as well are particularly helpful to help you do overall holistic portfolio planning. So back to presentation. Let me kind of summarize this from a flow perspective. Smart planning, this sizing, modeling, accelerating, and reserving your talent, if you will, is absolutely the way to accelerate portfolio flow, regardless of your delivery methodology. Assuming that we're talking Agile here, when you're reviewing your work, you simply size your work by putting roles into your resource capacity planning tool. It should show you right away where you have over allocations. It'll pump out your costs, right, and dependencies. If you determine you want to move forward, that's where the modeling is particularly helpful. You can introduce that work, see all the interplay across all the resources needed that you sized here, right? And sequence it so that when you go to your approving body, your business case not only includes everything that a lean business case should, but it also introduces a reliable, likely start date, which is particularly helpful, right? And then once it gets approved, you go deliver it using whatever tools that you need to. If it's a project, you're going to be using likely something like a PPM tool to do your WPS breakdown. If you're using, if it's an Epic, you're likely using Jira or ADO or some similar Agile work decomposition tool to break things down into stories and tasks and deliver from that perspective. So your teams continue to use the software they are comfortable with, but your planning functions use a centralized tool that allows them capabilities far beyond anything that typical Agile work decomposition tools do. And then when the next work comes in, or as you're getting ready for the next portfolio planning event, portfolio sync, whatever it may be, you just rinse and repeat. I love this quote, again, directly from scaledagilephramawork.com. Portfolio work can't go anywhere unless there's people to do it. So what we're advocating, use the best practices in SAFe. Smart planning. You'll get realistic delivery expectations. Your talent retention is designed right into your planning process, which is huge in today's talent environment. It greatly simplifies delivery coordination, and roadmaps can show exactly what can be delivered as opposed to what you want to deliver. So if you'd like to continue this conversation, we'd love to hear from you. There's a reason why we're in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for adaptive portfolio management and reporting. We're also #1, according to Gartner, in critical capabilities. Please reach out to us at ProSymmetry.com. We'd love to hear from you. There's plenty of case studies out there. Thank you for joining me today. Bye now.